And I'm very happy that so many followed our invitation to this corporate web multilogue. The corporate platform is an initiative of VUCA, an Austrian independent NGO in the field of business development. We are proud and grateful that many leading Austrian companies, together with the Austrian Development Agency, the Ministry for Economy, and the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, are long-standing partners of the corporate platform and support us. Also in this time of crisis, as you notice, otherwise we could not organize events like this one. This web multilogue series, Doing Business in Africa, we organized together with Hans Stoisser. Hans Stoisser and his platform Next Africa. The idea is to offer tangible insights into relevant success factors for doing business in Africa, discuss how entrepreneurs can react and adapt to specific challenges and demands on this continent, and also make us aware how much European decision makers can learn from their peers in Africa. Last time we had speakers from East Africa. This time we have moved on to West Africa. I'm very much looking forward now to the keynotes from our distinguished guests from Nigeria. Thank you very much, Peter Bankole and Ella Ume, for joining us today. You have a lot to share on this topic of this web multilogue, managing the new VUCA world. Yes, and Hans Stoisser will introduce both of you now in detail, and before that, introducing also the topic. Thanks, Hans, for taking over now.
Hello, thank you, Bernhard. Hello from my side, and good morning to this second webinar. As Bernhard said, organized by Corporate and Next Africa. I'm Hans Stoisser. Together we will go through these 90 minutes, and together we want to explore what we, European companies, can learn from African entrepreneurs and managers when it comes to coping with volatilities and uncertainties. This is the topic. I'm a co-founder of Next Africa. We bring together purpose-driven organizations from Europe and Africa. I'm actually broadcasting from Vienna, Austria, from my home office. So most of my colleagues from corporate are also in their home office. Imke, Sophie, and Christoph are working behind the scenes to make this webinar possible. In Vienna, actually, we are in the 5th week of lockdown. The first one with some easement though. And in this unprecedented situation, I think there's 50% of the interconnected global society now in full or partial lockdown. Shortly, we will connect to Nigeria and to get some insights from there as well. We will come to our program. Thank you for the feedback on the first one. It is actually a test and learn for us. So we are trying hard to improve with the second and maybe then a third webinar, that together we can create a valuable experience for all of us. The title is Managing the New VUCA World. As the impacts of COVID-19, Corona, are very new for us, we have conscientiously chosen the term VUCA, which also might be new for some of us. The term came up in the 1980s and it is an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So we are living in times of which are described by these 4 terms. We will go into that. I think the very first keynote will go into more detail into that. A world we in Europe, Western societies maybe are not really used to, contrary to African societies. So the question, what can we learn from Africa, was actually obvious or self-evident. The program, shortly, the program of this seminar. First, we are already in the middle in the first point of the introduction, Bernhard Weber and by myself. Then we go to, we get 2 keynotes directly broadcasted from Nigeria. Peter Bankole, managing successfully in the VUCA world, and the successful entrepreneur Elo Ume with some personal experience. Africa, a market like no other. And this is important for this webinar, we want to go into interactions, questions and answers. We also want to call some European entrepreneurs on stage. We will see if it works out, and there's a chat. And maybe with that I come to some technical introductions. On your right side, you see 4 columns. Right of the screen where you can see in the moment myself, you see one which is called chat. So this is where you can chat with other participants. The second one is questions. Here, please put your questions to the speakers. And then on the very right, you have people. So here you see how many people who has joined. We are very open in that. And maybe with this openness, we can contribute a bit to an open community of purpose-driven people and companies and organizations working in the African European context. And then there's another column called polls. So we can do both with you. And now I want to put online the first poll, asking where do you join us from? And maybe just as a test to get these tools of interaction more with us, you can put in where you're coming from. And I see you're starting to do that. Of course, the main audience of this is coming from Austria and Germany, but there are also some Africans joining us. And with that, I'm actually, while you give your input to that, I'm actually coming to the second point of our program, to the main point, or the 2 and 3 are the main points, we could say. So to the keynote, and I would like to ask Mr. Peter Bankole on stage. Peter, and while he will join us, hopefully, we just had a test, so he was there. Peter is from Lagos, Nigeria. He pioneered with the Enterprise Development Center. Peter Bankole, we are waiting for you. Yeah. He is already quite a known figure in Lagos. He pioneered with the Enterprise Development Center of the Pan-Atlantic University 17 years ago. He started that, and today is a director of that. And as the center is still moving strongly, that means Peter has quite done a good job in navigating to Nigeria's VUCA World. Peter also sits in several boards and also in the board of the Nigerian Climate Innovation Center. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Hello, how are you doing?
So finally, you're joining us. Yeah, that's nice. I'm just in the middle of presenting yourself. You are the director of the Enterprise Development Center of the Pan-Atlantic University. You are sitting in several boards. You are also the chairman of the International Breweries Foundations. How come that?
Well, the focus of the foundation is actually on youth development and support, and that's precisely what I do. So it was not too difficult for us to work together.
Okay, and you are also a member of the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council, where you're actually doing in the moment innovation challenges, how to overcome the COVID crisis, the corona.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
Peter, we are very much honored to have you with us. And now I would like to ask you to go ahead with your presentations.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans, and many thanks for inviting me to join you in this conversation. I was going to start with a poll asking how many of us have heard of VUCA before. But since that has already been done, well, we may still look at it if we want to, but I would say, how many of us have done business in Africa? How many of us have interactions or have done business in Africa? If that poll can go up, I will be grateful. So the poll is already up. Basically, have you heard of the term VUCA? So it's just to say I have or I have not. And then we will see the results of that. Okay. So from what we are seeing, it's still, so from VUCA, we have about a third of those in the house, they have not heard of VUCA. So, and we have 2/3 that have heard of VUCA. So it's interesting. So hopefully by the end of today, we will have increased our awareness and understanding of VUCA. And secondly, it looks as if quite a number of people, it's the same 2/3 have already done or are doing business in Africa, and about a third have not. So let's go. So like we've heard, VUCA is about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's just an acronym. Let's go a little bit deeper. So when we talk about volatility, it's basically a state of dynamic instability. And this happens quite frequently within the continent, especially in two broad areas, whether there is conflict or in a situation where a number of us are import dependent and we may not be able to predict how much a dollar will cost tomorrow. And so that gives room for a situation of dynamic instability when it comes to currency. Now, this we hardly see in Europe. Even when there are fluctuations, they are very, very minute. And it could take even a whole year before you have some drastic changes, unless, of course, there are major issues like it's happening at this time. The one that is more prevalent within the continent is actually that of uncertainty, which is a lack of clarity that hinders our ability to conceptualize threats and challenges being faced by the organizations that we lead. Now, this is the one I probably will focus on a lot more, because that, in the context of our world here in Africa, it's like a norm. It's like, you know, when you have malaria in Nigeria, it's not a big deal. People have malaria and it's fine. But when you have malaria in Europe, God help you, because it's treated as something that is really, really tough. And I've had a few friends that have gone through that experience. So it's the same way when we think of VUCA, a number of things are fairly normal, unlike what we have in Europe. So the C is complexity, and complexity it's synonymous with managing multi-layers, interconnected relationships where you do not have a cause and effect. So something may happen. Usually in quantitative research, we will say if something happens, this is likely to be the outcome. Now, in a complex situation, the same thing can happen and you will have multiple outcomes. So that's how complex things can be. And the final one is ambiguity, which leads to inefficiencies and missed opportunities. It's one of the leading causes of conflict in organization. So basically, that's a high-level understanding of VUCA. And now I will go into the business environment that basically talks about the issues around 4 areas. The first will be around operation. When you're operating in a business, in a VUCA environment, what does it mean? Operations generally means that you have to be in control of everything. So, for instance, as we are today, I have like 3 internet connectivities, just that in case one goes off, there's another one that can immediately latch.
Oh, so I'm sorry. I think we lost the connection to Lagos. We had a very good broadband connection to Lagos, but we lost it. I'm sorry for that. Maybe may I call now Elo Ume on stage, if possible? Elo?
Hi.
Hello, Elo. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. How is Lagos?
It's going okay. It's going okay. I haven't gone out today. We're all on lockdown, so but the weather is good. Sunny, not as sunny. It looks like it's going to be humid, but not wet.
Okay, so we have at least two things in common then. It's sunny in Vienna, and we have the lockdown as well. Yeah. So, unfortunately, I don't know. You have seen it. We just lost the connection with Peter.
Yes, I think we can go ahead and get him back if he's there, and then I can come in later.
But maybe
on.
maybe you can join in now with your presentation. Let me present you first to our audience.
I'm back in again.
Peter, you're back in. So
okay, so this is a classic example of a VUCA world, and I was just talking about internet. As I'm here today, I have 3 sources of internet access, and it is normal for us because I do know that there will be fluctuations. Perhaps the providers are not ready for the kind of traffic that we have today, that we have to work at home. But because we know that, we must develop a natural affinity to be able to do things using multiple sources or channels. And I'm glad that that disruption just happened to create or simulate a life environment of that. It also means that when you're talking of sales and marketing, you have to think beyond what is traditional in modern world. And so you probably will not have, now we're having some organized way of selling, but in a VUCA world, what you may term chaotic is what we term organized, chaos. Because you can see through what is seemingly chaotic and in our process. The issue of legal and regulatory, it's something that you have to be at abreast with. In one swoop, you can have a regulatory or a legal or a government pronouncement that can literally wipe off your business in one day. I give a very good example. We, like you have Uber, we also have what we call GoCada. GoCada is an equivalent of Uber, but is using motorcycles. And that was a very good business model because we usually have heavy traffic in Lagos. And so people could move around fairly quickly than you could do with Uber. And it was a very good business model. Things were working very well. And they were also using the Uber tracking system. All of a sudden, because of security challenges and other things, motorcycle usage was banned. And all of a sudden, all that investments and everything were put to question mark. But luckily, and this is the way the mindset of anybody operating in a VUCA world will do, they quickly shifted their business model from moving people to moving goods. And so today they do a lot of deliveries. And even at this time of lockdown, business has been extremely good. That is the way the mind of a VUCA World operator should be at this time. For finance and accounts, again, is exactly the same thing. We operate largely in a cash environment. We operate in an environment where interest rates are typically north of 25%. And it's only in government intervention that you have single digit rates. But in the real world here is usually north of 25. This is the kind of business environment that we work in. And if you're coming to work in any VUCA world, that is what you have to contend with. Now, just a quick one on coping strategies. The first thing that we have come to accept is that each and every one of us must be our own local government. What does that mean? You provide everything from the beginning to the very end, from how you manage supplies, your value chain, up till how you do your delivery. That's the way it works. It's no longer a problem because we're just used to it. Public power supply, for instance, can be erratic. And in fact, we make jokes that public power is like the standby. So you produce yours, whether you use generator, solar, or whatever, and then you use the public one as a standby. Volatility for us is normal. And so if it's not volatile, then it cannot be normal. Now that sounds strange. So I expect to wake up tomorrow and the dollar exchange rate will be different. So I prepare for it. How do I prepare for it, especially if I'm import dependent? It means that I have to look for a way of hedging against fluctuations, either by keeping currencies or by using my float capital to buy goods in advance. Of course, sometimes you can say that's inefficient, but the reality is that it helps you to stop, not to stop production. Which leads to the next one around, having buffers. Buffers could be in terms of stock. Buffers could even be in terms of personnel. So sometimes if you are aware that you are going to get a contract or you are going to upscale your production, even some resources that you do not need at this time, you will say, let me keep it for the next 1 or 2 months, because when I need these resources, I may not be able to have access to them. So these are the kind of buffers you think of in an uncertain environment. Complexity is about relationship management, because you do not know which button you will press that will lead to a particular outcome. And so for people that operate in a complex environment under the VUCA world, you need to be on ground. You need to understand, who are on ground that can make a difference to the business. You have to be, the relationship has to be cordial, almost with everybody that could make a difference into your business. Again, this requires patience. This requires understanding. This requires you just being a natural within the business environment. Of course, ambiguity, which is the last one, gives room for creativity. And so ambiguity, it's like there is no clarity. But even in the midst of that, if you are able to think through the possibilities, then you can have the first mover advantage because of your creative nature. Things are not smooth or straightforward. And constantly, you need to think, what else can I do with what I have to be able to achieve what I want to achieve? Now, what are the strengths and the factors which we see for success under the VUCA environment? The first for us is that your business model must be very resilient. And this, a lot of people in Europe, they actually take this for granted. For us, you have to constantly think of remodeling your business model. And it's not like you wait every year to do annual retreat. this is like thinking on your feet almost all the time because the situation changes like the weather. Now, for successful African companies, and I'm sure when Elo comes up, you probably will hear the same thing. There is some kind of DNA that we have that I will call it the can-do spirit. That can-do spirit makes people never to say never. And they will always look for a way out. When we started the e-commerce in Nigeria, the situation was really bad. Internet was not very good, and you know, internet is like a backbone to e-commerce. There were issues of trust, where if you place an order, people are likely not to pay because they don't know if the goods is going to arrive. But then this e-commerce provider said, we're going to get around it. And that's, you know, and then they came up with pay on delivery. And it worked well, and it started to build confidence in the system. And they had to put up all kinds of towers and everything to make sure that the internet works. Eventually today, they are motivating those that pay ahead of time. And I can safely say that that issue of mistrust of they will not deliver, even if I pay, seems to have faded away after so many years of practicing. Now, corporate culture is also a very important one. The way and the attitude, even when you employ somebody, you tend to know not just the person, you know their families, you know a lot about them. And so there is a web of things around each employee that is there. Now, of course, you can say, how about if I have 2,000 employees? Somehow there are going to be nests of people that knows people. And so you can always find people, you can always understand their background, you can always see where they're all coming from. And there is this spirit of, you know, helping one another, being at, you know, one another's beck and call. So it helps to hold the organization together and to strengthen them. And then the final part for me will be most companies are very agile, especially the small and the medium ones. And there's a lot of entrepreneurship that I have seen in most of these organizations, which means, yes, they may not be owning or running their businesses, but they behave like little entrepreneurs within companies. Now, that in itself gives room for the creativity that I talked about. It gives room for people to think on their feet, like I mentioned before. And then it means that when that culture is acceptable in an organization, it creates a unique DNA that makes them to be able to work successfully. Now, what are the key learning points from my side? Now, the first thing is that, yes, our environments are different. A lot of things are stable in the European setup, but we must begin to relocate our mindset, and we need to begin to shift our minds towards an environment that is unpredictable, is volatile, because the world we are entering today, that is precisely what is happening. We perhaps have been used to those situations, and we have become used to what people may call abnormal. But like I started at the beginning, when you get used to something that is abnormal, it becomes normal. And so we don't have to think very hard to be able to find solutions to things. We believe that problems will always come. And so the mindset is, how do we constantly develop people with problem-solving skill sets? We cannot assume that government will always work the way we want it. So we have to develop a mindset to also make things work by ourselves. In short, the one learning point that I would say is that just make up your mind that you are fully in charge. And when it works with the external world, then it's a bonus for you, but you're fully in charge. Now, from the current pandemic, what can we learn? It means that a lot of things, a lot of businesses, irrespective of infrastructure, must begin to think of digitizing their processes. They must begin to think of getting things online. In less than 2 weeks, all our processes in the university, for instance, all the physical classes that we used to have, everything has gone online. In fact, we're doing a lot more and more interesting stuff today online that we started querying ourselves that even if the pandemic is over, we will go back to the class the way we used to go. And the answer today is no. And so we see this period also as a retreat and learning period. And for us, if you cannot come out of a terrible situation and come out stronger, then you have not mastered the art of a VUCA world. I think that would be my slide, and then we will leave the rest to the Q&A. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Peter, for these insights you gave us from a VUCA world, from a Nigerian point of view. Let me just emphasize to all our participants, you can ask questions in the question sectors, and you can vote for them. And those which are voted mostly, we will ask firstly. So I liked specifically when you said this is a joke, but the public power is the backup power. Yeah, this is what you said, and you have to be in charge of what you're doing. And when you're not coming out from a crisis better off, then you are not able to master a VUCA world. Quite tough words, I have to say, yeah, and many discussions. And there is one question from Anja Herbert, which came in early and has been voted 6 times already for that. In Austria specifically, we do have many small and medium-sized enterprises. And now everybody has to digitize. You said the same. Within 2 weeks, we have to go online, yeah, and so on. But digitization overwhelms many of these small and medium companies. Does this challenge also exist in your country, in Nigeria? And are there concepts for digitizing these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. It does exist in our country. And I always use my organization as an example. We have all levels of people. And in 2 weeks, I have seen people that are drivers, that are in cafeteria services, go on Zoom, which they have never been in their lifetime. And so it's about the mindset. I have seen when COVID started, people were a bit anxious. They were worried about what next. But it took only 1 week. And after 1 week, people said, that's it. We cannot continue like this. What can we do? And if digitization is a solution, then we just have to do it. But what people are seeing is that they are not able to do everything again by themselves. So I can, like a restaurant, they close down restaurants. And this guy says, yes, you can close down restaurants, but my kitchen can still function. But I need to get it to you. And I can't allow you to come to me because of social distancing. What can I do? Let me look for delivery vehicles or delivery motorcycles that can deliver to you. Now, how can I receive payment? There are 2 options. If I can't do it by myself, there are platforms that helps you to get on it within 24 hours. So you sign up to those platforms and they help you to quickly digitize. So one thing that you need to understand is that you may not be the one to either digitize, whether it's the payment system or the ordering system. There will be some people that is their business. Hook up onto them very quickly and start from that process. Don't let your business suffer because you cannot do everything from end to end.
So collaboration you are calling for.
Exactly. Collaboration within the ecosystem is absolutely critical. In fact, we did a survey last week and we had almost 2,000 SMEs that said exactly the same thing, that for them to survive, 80% of them said they have to collaborate.
Okay. Thank you very much. And maybe at this stage, we will come back then after the second keynote again, but just one more question, which also got voted very high, 5 votes. is anyone applying systemic modeling tools? This is a question from Jürgen Sturany from Vienna.
Sorry, come back again. Systemic to how?
Systemic modeling. Yeah. Do you know systemic modeling? Is this something done in Nigeria? It's the right question for you.
I laugh because in a VUCA world, systemic presupposes that there are some assumptions that are either stable, you make some things. In a VUCA world, all those assumptions collapses with just one single factor. And so, yes, we do have, and mostly the big organizations do have, this modeling, even financial modeling, all kinds of stuff. But for us, all those things collapse when you are in a real VUCA world. But yes, we do it, and it exists.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much, Peter, for that. In the moment, you will be back on stage soon. Now I'm asking Elo Ume on stage. Yes, also from Lagos. We have seen him already. Elo is the founder and the CEO of Daragon Group. Daragon Group is a leading data-driven marketing company acting in 4 African countries. Hello, Elo, again.
Hi, thanks very much.
I'm just
good morning again.
Yeah. Everything fine still?
Yes. All good this side. All good.
Okay, great. I'm just introducing you as a person. You are, before we go into the slides, please. You are the founder and the CEO of a leading data-driven marketing company. You will explain what it is, acting in 4 African countries and in India, with an office in London. And all the big international companies from Unilever to Samsung are your clients. So you worked in mobile all your life, you said? And actually what I read in an interview with you is that you see management or leadership as a service. And this impressed me a bit. And we are very grateful that you are joining us, and we are honored by that. So please, may I ask you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the very warm introduction. And good morning, everybody. I am out of Lagos, Nigeria, obviously. Lockdown. Lagos has been shut down for 2 weeks, but we have been shut down for 3 weeks. So we closed the offices a week before the government asked us to close. We have made quite a bit of adjustments. For us, not as steep as some other businesses, because we've always played in digital. Thanks again for having me. I would share with you about the Daragon business, just to shed some context as to our evolution and why we play in Africa or in the markets that we play. Then I will go on to talk about our experiences with VUCA from an Africa context. I'll try to make them as practical as possible, and hopefully I can learn some lessons, and also you can also take some practical experiences which you can apply in Africa and also potentially in Europe. So Daragon is a data analytics and marketing cloud business. We help companies make sense of their data in a world that is very mobile. In Africa, there are 700 million mobile connections, and there are about 500 million unique mobile connections. There's a lot of multi-SIMing. That's the difference. When you think about the internet in Africa, you think mobile. Everything is mobile because there was never broadband. So a lot of evolution, like in Europe, where there's credit cards, where there are strong databases of consumers, where there is home identification systems. In Africa, the first identification that you can have for an individual is potentially through their mobile devices. So there's quite a bit of a concentration around being able to identify and connect to a user on mobile. So we, as a business, use an enterprise software platform, which we sell to companies, and they ingest their data in this platform and use it and try to use it to connect to their customers. We have filed 4 patents globally. We're the largest aggregators of mobile apps on the continent because the data source for us. And we help some of the largest telcos on the continent make sense of their data. As you've heard earlier, we are present in Lagos, Nigeria, Nairobi, Kenya, Johannesburg, South Africa. Our technology, we have an office in Bangalore, India, where a lot of our research and development is done. And we also have an office in Accra, Ghana. I've talked already about our business model. We have a platform. We have two business model interwoven into our two pricing models interwoven into our business model. On the one side, a licensing for our platform for the enterprise software, and a recurring fee on the application revenues, the application charges that they make calling into our software. So that's typically how we work. We sell the software to telcos, to banks, to SMEs, and to large brands. We work with MTN, Airtel, Vodafone, also work with some of the largest banks, Access Bank, Standard Bank, and brands, Unilever, Heineken, AB InBev, etc. This is our typical business model. On the demand side, we bring brands, and then on the supply side, we connect them to telco channels, and we also connect them to large publishers. Publishers would be the likes of large newspapers, Economist, Financial Times, and also SMS, USSD channels on telcos. So we profile them and help them connect on that channel. Like I said, the internet in Africa is first of all mobile before anything else. So coming to the meat of it, and this is really the title that was talking about Terragon, just to shed some context. And then to the meat of it, I particularly like this picture. It's a picture from a part of Africa, which I consider the heart of Africa. But I don't know if I can take a poll of where in Africa was this picture taken. Is that okay? This picture is in what part of Africa? Can that poll be taken, please? Hi. Anyway, so I'll go ahead. So this picture is from the Congo Basin, which is a very, very thick rainforest. I think it kind of like depicts the essence of what we're dealing with today, which is VUCA. With this picture, you can get a sense for it's quite nice. It's very nice. And Peter alluded to it, an organized chaos. You can see the vegetation, very organized. And you can see the river flowing through. And this, for me, summarizes what you find in Africa. There's a lot of fertility here. But inside this vegetation, there's going to be a whole bunch of animals and potentially human settlements. When I think about Africa, I think about doing business in Africa, which I've done for the last 10 years as an entrepreneur. And before then, 8 years working for a company that started out of Nigeria, and I was responsible for expanding that company across Africa. So this is my second experience growing out an Africa business. This typically summarizes what you find in Africa. You go into a place and it's extremely difficult to find your way around. So going into the meat of it, VUCA experiences in Africa. I try to summarize it as talent, energy, mindset, tribal sentiments, governments, and socioeconomic. All of them have very dynamic elements. For instance, from a talent perspective, the average person you meet in Nigeria is entrepreneurial and is thinking about how would this be of benefit to me? While you go to Ghana, which is 40 minutes away, flying by air from Lagos, Nigeria, the guy is more, what is this guy about? What is this Nigerian trying to sell to me? This Nigerian, on the average, a Ghanaian views a Nigerian as an opportunist and views everything a Nigerian says from an opportunist perspective. Maybe a European approaches the Ghanaian, the perspective is different. And this is how you look at talent on the continent. Energy. The Nigerian is 10x more active, right? That's connecting it to talent. Then connecting it to power, electricity. Nigeria has almost no power. Your primary source of power, you have to provide, right? While in Kenya, there's relatively stable power. In South Africa, there's relatively stable power. Each of the markets, you deal with different challenges. Mindset. When you talk to a Black South African, this is also tribal, laid back, very limited initiative, but that also comes from their background and their history. In Kenya, you have similar in East Africa. Laid back, not as entrepreneurial. But when you come to West Africa, it's very different. In West Africa, Nigeria, very entrepreneurial. While in Ghana, not as entrepreneurial. And it goes on with the 54 countries. But why are these things important? I think that business, first of all, is about people, right? And if you can get people right and how you allocate that resource in the different markets, I think it's important. Figuring that out helps build a platform for potential success. So specific challenges as relates to Terragon: volatility, foreign exchange, and hedging the dollar or the euro risk. Nigeria, for instance, very commodity driven. We've devalued our currency 3 weeks ago or a month ago, as soon as the oil price started to tank. Did we see that coming? There has been rumors about it since last year. But we're always looking at the Brent crude price, the WTI price. These frictions affect us directly because it affects availability to Forex and other things. You look at Kenya, where GDP is about 30%, tourism is about 30% of GDP. Think about the shock, right? And that 30% of GDP, potentially 50% of Forex comes from tourism. In Kenya, with that Forex gone, oil price in Nigeria tanked, South Africa tourism, there's also tank, commodities down. You can see that most African economies in 2020 are toast. There is going to be the volatility from a foreign exchange standpoint and the physical impact of that and how that connects back to public finance, right? Public finance and what private sector can do potentially is going to be very steep. That leads to the uncertainties, right? Uncertainties with political shock. If there are no fiscal buffers in most of these largest markets in Africa, right? Then there can be civil unrest. With civil unrest, security situation starts to get really, really bad. Already, we've been on lockdown for the 3rd week now, and there's some tension already. Most people, at least 40% of the population feed from hand to mouth. They have to go out every day to earn a living to feed. If they've been on lockdown with palliatives for 2 to 3 weeks, there's already a tense situation, and that comes from the volatility from the lockdown of the pandemic, right? This can lead to terrorism in some parts of the country. This can lead to terrorism from Somalia infused terrorism into Kenya, right? And it can potentially lead to change of government with political shock if these things get out of hand, right? So volatility, uncertainty are things that when a few years ago, about 3-4 years ago, after every round of Kenyan elections, there's a lot of uncertainty. After the elections, offices get shut for months, a month, 6 weeks. We already built that into how we operate. And what are the impact of that? You know that your revenues in that market will tank. Why? Because the similar lockdown you're having now, you have those lockdowns after every election cycle in Kenya. While in Nigeria, the lead up to an election, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what will come out of that election. But Nigeria has come somehow, after elections, continued, right? Those uncertainties have led to nothing. That does not mean that in the next election cycle, there won't be uncertainties. Policy direction. Policy direction gets always affected in countries. In Nigeria, in Kenya, These are policy directions. There's a lot of shifts. As governments change, there's a lot of shifts. These shifts, how do you think about them? How do you preempt them? How do you make sure the source of information from one government to another government is always available, and you have those corridors to be able to get that information? This leads to the complexity of doing business in Africa, the actual complexities. You think about tribal sentiments in Nigeria. You're building a business in Nigeria, for instance. When you want to build a brewery, you want to bring an alcoholic beverage into Nigeria. An alcoholic beverage into Nigeria is one that, from religious standpoint, doesn't get sold in northern Nigeria. There is a mix of population across Nigeria, right? Christian, Muslim, Islam, different cultures, all across different parts of the country. But in some areas, there's more than others. Northern Nigeria, more Muslim than southern Nigeria. However, it's when you're bringing an alcoholic business to Nigeria, you have to think about the sentiments of the northern leaders. You meet an average northerner and ask him to be a part of this business. It's almost insulting. That is not something that you do. So that's something that you need to build into coming into Nigeria. You come to the southern part of Nigeria. How do you navigate the terrain in Southeast Nigeria, which is very entrepreneurial, and Southwest Nigeria more open, right? And the economic power of Nigeria sits in the Southwest. How do you build in all these elements into operating in Nigeria, right? You go to South Africa to set up a business and run a business that long-term can be sustainable. You have to understand the BEE, which is the Black Empowerment Program. The Black Empowerment Program has different levels, level 1 to 4. The level of what level you are or you're able to build into your business by having Black people in the business determines how nimble you are with some public and private sector driven opportunities. If a bid comes from a company, they have to find out your BEE level before you can get those things. And there are workarounds to this. But there's nothing like BEE in Nigeria, right? Then you come into ambiguities around licensing. You go to Kenya. In the telecom sector in Kenya, before you get a license, you must have 30% local participation, right? And even in simple things like how people deal with you culturally. In Ghana, I alluded to this, when a Ghanaian meets a Nigerian, there's already a fence, right? However, how do you surmount this? How do you build partnerships, long-term friendships that is able to break some of these barriers, right? How do you think through the legal entities? What sort of legal entities can companies set up? Terragon, for instance, has operating entities in each of these countries to manage our volatility on foreign exchange. In some countries that we have gaps, we're able to bill into Mauritius, right? We're able to invoice into Mauritius and keep entities as more operating entities for payment of salaries and for meeting legal requirements. But from a financial perspective, we have a holdco on top of these operating entities that receive some of our cash. However, some of our revenues. However, when you think about in Nigeria, where we cannot do this, because Nigeria and South Africa, it's extremely difficult to pay money outside to a different entity for services rendered in the country. In Kenya and Ghana, we can get away with this, right? So this helps us with some of our forex volatility risk in these markets. So some of these things, culture, something like corruption. Nigeria, I like to say, in Nigeria, what you see is what you get. In Ghana, for instance, what you see is not what you get. Or in Kenya, what you see sometimes not what you get, because the cultures are very different. How are you able to be discerning? You need to be more discerning. You need to be very discerning in dealing and managing with people in each of these markets. In Nigeria, people are always on their feet, entrepreneurial. You have to have that at your mindset. You have to have that you have to always think about that. Otherwise, they will be faster. They will be every opportunity counts for them. So being on your feet and being able to navigate these are elements that must be built into the resilience of the business. Some of our learnings so far. Some of the things that we try to do is we try to build resilience into our business models. I give a simple example. We monetize mobile web pages for publishers. Monetizing of mobile web pages is one that has limited policy shocks. However, something that can potentially have a lot of policy shocks is privacy. How do we make sure that we hedge the monetization and the privacy against each other, but is the same value chain? Or we think about commerce. Some of our customers are SMEs. They have, electronic commerce. Some of our customers are SMEs. They have a payment terminal in their shop, in their stores. They receive payments, they pay a fee on that payment. How do we, as we bring consumers to them, we charge a fee for that consumer that is being brought, right? And for everything that is, for every payment that is made, we also charge a fee. Potentially, on the payment side, we could lose some of our leverage, but that's also us building resilience. Today, that business model is one that is working today, but we've built some resilience into it so that as things change, we can, if there's a shock on one end, we can remain on another side. Multi-pronged strategy. As a business, we started off 10 years ago having a mobile ad network, a digital agency business, and a content aggregation business. Three of them, three different revenue streams. Each of them go through their shocks, highs and lows, just like everything else. But in Africa, to organize that chaos, if it was just one thing we were doing and we're focused on it, if there's a shock, we can't hedge that shock with another side of the business. So multi-pronged, being able to build, but of course, all those three businesses are very focused on mobile and they're all interrelated. It also connects back to resilient business models, depth of relationships. In organizations, in Africa, it comes down to who do you know, what access do you have to them, and trust, building trust, right? It is not, I think competence is very important. We would not be able to even set up a platform or be able to grow a business without competence. But the relationship that goes into beyond that competence is also equally important. From a policy perspective, how do you have corridors that let you know, or corridors to changing situations, that information from a 2-minute phone call, super important. Some of the learnings as well, be prepared, always be prepared. This is the motto of the Boy Scouts, which I think is super relevant in Africa. A simple example is public power, you can't rely on it. So some places in my office, we have public power, we have a generator, and we have a backup generator. That is us being prepared. Because public power will be down, our main generator could go down, but our backup generator must not go down. Similar at home, now that we are working remotely, I have internet connection, like Peter talked about, 2 different internet connections. You must always be prepared. That's from a micro standpoint. Macro, anything can happen. Anything can happen. How are we hedging the risk of civil unrest? Earlier on this week, we had to come together and make some payments to make sure that people who don't have employment and stuff around us are taken care of. That is us being prepared for any eventualities. Agility. One way, like I tell people, you have a system that says we need to invest $2 million in this to make sure it happens, because we've done it in 10 markets and it works in all 10 markets. It's worked in all 10 markets. I tell people in Africa, if your system says invest $2 million in 1 year, I would say invest $200,000 in 6 months. Test it out, make sure it works, figure out what will go wrong and what went well, double down on what went well, and cut off what went wrong. Because what will go wrong will go wrong. So that agility, that being nimble, that A/B testing for every leg of things. And after you have A/B tested the entire value chain, you bring everything together and then set things up and run with it. But saying that you have a system that you throw in $2 million and you just go on with it, nah, that could be very costly, because you could run that entire system and afterwards you lose the entire 2 million, when you could have just gone with something smaller and grow it incrementally. And then to the last learning, scenario planning, which connects back to agility and connects back to being prepared. If plan A, this is the outcome. With plan A being the outcome, plan B, what is that outcome? When we go to a multi-pronged strategy, the Terragon business, mobile advertising right now is thriving. While on the content aggregation side for monetization, the average consumer, their spending power is going down. But from a business to business standpoint, mobile advertising is going up. So our enterprise SaaS business is climbing. That helps us with resilience. That's the scenario plan around our enterprise software business gets stronger. However, on monetization of content, of mobile content and goods, that piece may potentially be coming down. That is scenario planning and mitigating those things. Mitigating whatever downside comes from the shocks. So these are ways that we have been able to navigate business in Africa. That will be it from me. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elu. This was definitely a passionate input of how to work in a VUCA world. And it was definitely something where we can learn a lot. You structured it quite well with this 6 learning: resilient business models, multi-pronged strategy, depth of relationships. This is something I think this is my thinking now, where Europeans can learn a lot from African countries. Be prepared at all times was your 4th point, agility and scenario planning. So definitely VUCA, definitely digital business. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you very much.
And now I want to ask also Peter on stage. And while he will come, we will go to the first question. We have 2 questions from the audience which were voted 11 times up. Well, this is probably quite a question which have often been asked to the 2 of you, and I want to ask it now to Peter. Maybe we heard it from Judith Stenmerdink. We heard to set up a business in an African country, it needs a local partner on the ground. But how can you find a trustable local partner?
Okay, thank you very much. I often hear of this, and it is true. But like I tell my small businesses, when you need financing, that's not the time to start to go to your bankers. You need to start by building relationships. Be part of a neutral platform or platforms where you get to know people. In my presentation, and indeed Elo alluded to it, you need to build relationship ahead of when you need them. And so be part of, larger conferences, whatever, and get to know the locals. And then you can find out who can be trusted. But do not go looking for or searching when you are in their need. That will be my first advice. I don't know if.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. It was quite a clear answer. Elo, actually, I did not say that you studied at ESE during your career. I think it wasn't not so long ago. So in your mid-career, so to say, you did an MBA at a European university. ESE. How does it relate to the VUCA world of Nigeria? Did you learn many things from there?
Yeah, I think that is a mix of experiences. I think my practical experience kind of like took some of the learnings from ESA as well. And the essays, and some of the stuff I got from ESA also, I've added it to my practical experiences. So it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid of learnings. But definitely that experience was well worth it. If I was going to do it again, I'll do it again. And if anybody asks me, I'll tell them right away that they should do it.
Okay, so there might be a fruitful collaboration between Europe and Africa in this sense.
Absolutely, I do. I completely agree. I think that from a proximity standpoint, Europe is 6 hours away, and there's nowhere else that is closer. Some places are 5 hours away. I think there can be more business. I can go to Europe in the morning. I can come back at night if there's connections. And that is what you need to do business, really. So definitely there's more that can be done. I think that there are just some prejudices, stereotypes that we need to work on, and that takes getting used to.
Yeah. So if there is connections, if there's connection, there are flights. You can go to Europe. Well, in a day, go back and forth from Nigeria, or maybe 2 days.
Yeah, we have an office in London. I go to London in the morning of a Monday.
Okay.
And I come back to Lagos on Tuesday.
Okay.
Maybe post-Corona world, you see how that evolves, but that is how it's been for me for the last year or so.
Okay, that's business as it has been in the moment. You have to say, yeah. We will see how it will be in the future. And there is one question from the audience, from Johann Stöger. Will Africa have more or less power after this crisis, after this Corona crisis, I think? And he put in the example, the currency in South Africa lost again 20% in the last month. Will they come back after this crisis? And maybe in Nigeria it's similar. Yeah? Who wants to ask that?
I can go ahead. I think that Africa, first of all, I think one of the biggest things that's come out of this crisis is the global dependence on a supply chain that is driven by China. And when we look at the elements around that supply chain, Africa needs to invest significantly in infrastructure. China 30 years ago is not China of today. And if we get infrastructure right, the productivity gains can be much stronger. And from a cost standpoint, the market also is moving Africa. Africa has 1.2 billion people with significant room to grow. So from a productivity standpoint, and when you look at knowledge, you look at education, you look at institutional structures, and proximity, I think Europe and Africa collaborating can be a very strong influence on the post-Corona world. So my answer to that is yes. This potentially is the future, and this crisis points to it.
Okay, very positive outlook on the European-African relations in the post-Corona world. Peter, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I actually am aligned with Elo.
I can't hear Peter.
I put in the chat that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Okay, so for me, I agree with Elo. In terms of time zone is maximum, unlike have -6 to 8, or where you have +7 to 10. So it's a lot easier in terms of tradition, in terms of culture, in terms of nearness, in terms of so many things. There are alignment with Europe. And for me, we will have to rethink. Oh my God. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Oh, now you're lost. Okay, that's the VUCA World. Sorry, Elo, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
You can hear me? Yeah. Okay, so you in Lagos and Peter is in Lagos. So and the both of you, interestingly, had the communication problem we from Europe, I guess, we always could hear you. And this maybe is a symbol of how it in former times was, yeah? But not anymore is, I guess, looking at your business. And maybe let me go to the next question. In this case, Camillus Conque, also from Nigeria, but living in Vienna. I know him personally very well. He's asking the question, verifying potential business partners in terms of credibility, reliability, and security. Is it a challenge in Nigeria? And would you be willing to collaborate with a company in Europe, which is a service provider in this area? This is a question for you, Elo. Would you be willing to collaborate with a credible partner in Europe?
Yes, why not? I think that we need to open up gateways. If there is opportunity, and I think if we identify the opportunities, we can definitely collaborate to find ways of extending mutually beneficial opportunities across both markets. So definitely there is some opportunity, and let's define how we can harness it.
Okay, thank you. Very positive, very good. Let me maybe at this point, point of our webinar, let me just tell to everybody that the webinar will stay on after it ended at 11:30. It will stay on for another 20 minutes, and you, the speaker, the participants, still can exchange views on the chat sections or exchange addresses or whatever. Yeah, so it's like in a real seminar. Then afterwards you meet at the bar, you can still meet here in the chat room. Peter, you were interrupted in the middle. How will Africa come out of this crisis, with more or with less power?
Well, I don't like to think of it as power. I think there will be a redefinition of relationships. I think one thing that has worked well for China is that they focus on doing business rather than getting involved with the local politics. I think in the West, people try to redefine relationship through, what they believe, what they don't believe, and things like that. I think coming out of this, we're not probably going to meddle too much with local politics. We will look at the substance and we will say, let us work together. Like the last question you asked, it has to be a win-win situation. And it's very interesting the way I saw Elo think through the answer, because it's not that we're going to jump at everything. No. The two parties must see it as a win-win situation. Unlike when one party wants to sell to the other and the other is always at the receiving end. This is what I see post-coronavirus.
Oh, okay. So thank you very much for this answer and this contribution. Thinking on win-win, yeah. This is also what we have to learn in Europe and probably in the US as well, so in the Western world. And at this point, we wanted to bring on stage also some 1, 2, or 3 Austrian German entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, with 2 of them, it doesn't work out. So I say, I'm sorry for Mark Sander and Diana Ribeiro, who we wanted to put on stage, but we do see here technically that it's not possible. But Thomas Kukowitz, I want to connect to Rome. He's an Austrian living in Rome, and hopefully he will come on stage now. Thomas is quite African experienced, I have to say, in many countries. In the moment, he runs the Africa business of Technik Plus, a Styrian from Steiermark.
Hear me now? Yeah.
Hello, Thomas.
Hello. Good.
How are you?
Good morning. Or a good day. Hello.
How are you?
Fine. Thank you very much.
How is Rome? I'm just introducing you. You are living in Rome, in the lockdown in Rome. But you are representing Technik Plus, a producer of machinery for tropical and subtropical machinery, subtropical
agriculture.
You are living in Rome, and when we had our small chat yesterday, when we tried the technical chat, you said all countries south of Austria, including Italy, are much more used to crisis.
Yes, especially Italy. I think.
What is your take on African countries and the VUCA world?
Well, I mean, Peter was pointing it out that they have two sources of internet. I mean, it's the same in Italy, more or less, like, because one internet always goes down, but not during crisis, during normal times. So, and the same with electricity. We have regular power cuts. And since I lived in Lebanon also for quite some time, we always had a generator and a backup generator and something called UPS, which means if you don't have a generator but the power cuts off, you still have this battery pack which supplies your computer till you actually switch on the generator. Okay, it's not that bad in Italy, but we are used to it. So Italy was hit by the financial crisis. I mean, Italy has always been a country that, I mean, we had more than 60 governments since 1945, 60 governments since 1945. So it really tells you that people here are adapted quite well. And I think Africans have the same issue. Either they have a lot of governments or just one president for a lifetime. But anyway, you have to deal with it. And yes, I mean, I totally agree when Peter, but also when Elo pointed out that you need to be prepared, like tribal sentiments, social unrest that might happen. And this is something that can happen also here all the time, because Italy has always been known as the country with a lot of protests, and people easily rise up and protest against something. They might, and if we have a general strike, it's not like Austria that everything is operational, and in the media we will learn about a protest by the union has taken place. No, here it means a city of 3 million stands still. So we got used to it. We can deal with it.
Okay, so thank you very much for pointing out the parallels between Italy and Africa, in this case, African countries. So you think that we, let's say now the German-speaking world, can learn from African countries? This is what you agree?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there are a few things that we certainly must learn. The first thing is communication. As I think Peter was already pointing it out before, and also you, that Austrians suddenly, and also some Nigerians who weren't used to use these kind of technologies before, but I remember quite well, it has always been an issue for Austrians when I told them, let's have a quick Skype call. No, they wanted me to come, which means it's a full day, excuse me to say, so wasted. I need to get up early, get to the car, fill it with gas to go to Vienna from Graz when I still lived there. You know, it was like a full day for a 20 minutes meeting, which we could have easily done on Skype. And this is something with Africans, and not only Africans, also with my colleagues and partners in Uruguay. You just do it. You just send a message like WhatsApp and say, let's have a quick video call, and that's it. So in Austrians, for the first time in their life, are really also those who have always resisted, and they are forced now to do it. And I think those who think outside the box, they much easier adapt to this. Whereas some Austrians, and I know some really huge companies in Austria who for them it's a big deal. You know, for them it's like catastrophe. What is happening now? We need to do home office. How are we setting it up? They have like 20 meetings just to agree on a date to have a Skype call, you know? And these things are so much easier going in the Southern world or in Africa or in Latin America. So this is something we need to learn quick. Then don't stick to one platform. Use WhatsApp, use Signal, use anything that works, and just don't overthink these stuff. Then if you have an email address, you know, it doesn't matter if it's called sweetie68@gmail.com. Like the Austrians always want to have a professional server-related email. Like these little things don't matter, you know, just communicate. This is the point.
Okay. So thank you so much. Thomas, thank you so much for your contribution. Hope to see you physically anyhow.
Yes, of course.
Okay, bye-bye, Thomas.
Bye.
Okay, so back here in our chat room, in our webinar room, Nigeria, Vienna, Austria. Let's go to the next question. We have still 58 people watching. That's quite a big number. So thank you for your interesting keynotes and the passion you brought into it. The next most highly voted question is from Britta Wolfikammer from Nairobi. She's asking now to Nigeria, how is the security situation in Lagos in times of lockdown, and how is it affecting your operations? We are in Nairobi, they are in partial lockdown. So this is now a question from Eastern Africa to the Western side.
Okay, so...
Yeah,
please, Peter, go ahead.
Okay. So we think the first 2 weeks was relatively calm. Last weekend, they started to show some signs of things getting to break point. We think there hasn't been any civil unrest. The security situations, there have been reports of skirmishes here and there, but nothing out of control. We think that if we can manage through this week, then next week there should be some relative calm. Hopefully, the lockdown doesn't get extended, but the government is building in palliatives and trying to manage how these palliatives are being given to the affected people. So still very calm. Things haven't gotten out of hand. Security is still under control, and hopefully it stays that way. That's the current situation.
Okay, so from
in terms
my
of how
end,
it's affecting people, our operations,
okay.
We are remote. We're also a technology business, so not much of an impact. Our infrastructure working fine. Services continues to go on. Our customers' demand has gone up slightly. So overall, positive.
Okay, thank you very much. Elo, Peter.
Okay, so for me, first of all, the last 2 weeks has been relatively calm as well. We have been able to manage because people feel that it's a solution, let's just go through it. But there are two different types of palliatives which we need to understand. There is a government palliatives, either at the federal level or at the state level, but there is also the individual or group palliatives, and that seems to be working a lot better. So whether it's at the church or mosque level, individual levels, I mean, I have loads of people. My ESA LBS group, we came together and we gave about 500 families, goodies that can last them for a week or two. We have people that gives at the churches and that level. We have people that send as little as 10,000 into different accounts just to make sure that people are able to survive this. The only thing that I see, yes, there have been skirmishes here and there, but not heavy. If after this second 2 weeks, it's not relaxed, that is where I fear that we may begin to have bigger issues. So hopefully, after the lockdown of 4 weeks, we should honestly get back to work somehow. But in terms of impact, it has actually been very positive for us. We've been able to design more social distance products and services. And interestingly, I will say this year may actually be one of our best years in our 18-year history. So there you go.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Coming to the next question, in a way related to that, from Karl Hans Sportshofer. You, meaning probably African countries, African countries have Ebola, dengue, and malaria. Are you really afraid about Corona?
Well, let me start and then maybe Elo can continue. The honest truth, I don't think most people are really afraid. They are afraid of hunger much more than Corona. And secondly, I think it's a media issue. We've had more challenging stuff than Corona. Corona is just a virus. The reality for me is that we have more lesser fever issues than Corona in Nigeria as of today. That is not being widely thought about, but they just turned Corona into a global issue and everybody's freaking out. But we had more issues with lesser fever today in Nigeria than that. Now, we have solutions. That's the truth. Even if you just think that, you may be contacting the virus. We have all kinds of roots and herbs you put together and steam corona out. I mean, I did it a couple of times. I just feel good, and that's it. You move on. You don't even imagine. It cannot put you down. That would be my contribution. But Elo, I don't know your point.
Elo?
Well, I think that there's, I think we're playing with the number, not playing, I think we are dealing with a number of things. One is the novelty of corona. We don't know the characteristics of this flu. So there is an uncertainty, significant uncertainty in that. Then the other part is the transmission. The sicknesses quoted there, Ebola, you had to be significantly symptomatic before you transmit Ebola. And mortality of Ebola was about 50%. So it was harder to get. However, the mortality rate was much higher. In this case, transmission is plus the novelty. Transmission is almost like you don't even know when you have it. And in some cases, asymptomatic people pass it on. So it's a serious situation, and it's one that we need to deal with all seriousness. And that is why it has, from a pandemic standpoint, the spread is so global, the impact is even more, but the mortality may not be as high, but it paralyzes things. And it's also that novelty factor comes with it. So how do we, I guess everybody's learning from this experience, and it's serious enough, and we need to give it that seriousness. Other malaria, for instance, is passed from mosquito. But I have lived in Africa for 40 years, and in this time, I have some immunity to malaria. The mosquitoes need to really, really bite me before I get the malaria. So it's very, very different.
Okay, so Elo, thank you very much for this views on corona. Now we have been talking about corona and the pandemic itself, but the topic of our seminar was much more about, now I'm seeing, wait a moment, we are coming to an end, but this was too early with the slides. Peter, you are back. So we are we are at the end of our seminar. We have been exploring the question, African VUCA world, your strategies, how to cope with it. Can we Europeans learn from that? I'm really grateful. I thank you very much, Pankole and Elo Ume, for sharing your valuable experience and ideas with us, for giving us a mainly German-speaking, not only, also from Kenya, many people joined, but in the majority it was a German-speaking audience, insights into the VUCA world in Nigeria and how you navigate through it. I have learned a lot of it, I have to say. It was a big pleasure and honor to have you both with us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas Kukovet, and thank you, participants at the screens who contributed to that question and your attention in order to explore together the topic of how to cope with the VUCA world and what we can learn from African companies and executives. This webinar was organized with a cooperation by Corporate and Next Africa. Please look at it at the website and newsletter. Right after the webinar, you get a follow-up email right now with links to the presentation and the link where we ask for your feedback. And as I already said, you can stay in the chat room for another 20 minutes. It will be open and you can chat with Peter and Elo. I want to ask Bernhard now on stage, who will say goodbye to you, but now it might be goodbye from my side. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. It was of value for you, I hope. I would wish it was a small step in bringing purpose-driven people from Africa and Europe together. Keep interested, keep connected, join our community. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's been my pleasure.
Enjoyed this very interesting corporate webinar, with plenty of enriching insights into the VUCA world, and even with practical lessons, as the one of Banky when he lost the connection. So thank you. The webinar really showed how much there is to learn from business people from Africa, and this is especially true for the VUCA topic. Again, many thanks to you both, Benke and Ella, for your valuable time and for all what you shared with us. Thanks also to Hans and to all for you participating. I'm very sorry that we cannot go on networking face-to-face now with a drink and some snacks. The only what we can do is to keep the webinar open for a further hour so that you can do some networking via the chat tool, as Hans has already mentioned. Then the next multi-log, as you already can see on the slide, will be on May 13th. The topic will be where and how to invest, and yeah, more on the topic, and the guest speakers will follow soon on our webpage. Hope to see you there. And as you know, we have no room limit, so please feel free to forward our invitation to your friends, colleagues, whoever who think you could be interested. Thank you very much for joining. Have a good day. Bye.